Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the ROKER RAPPORT podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. It's Gav here, back in the host chair today as we chat about Sunderland's draw with Preston, look ahead a little bit at Blackpool and discuss everything else going on around the club at the minute. First of all, I'll introduce you to today's guests on the review show. I'm joined once again by my mate Chris Wynn. Morning Chris, how we doing?
Good morning Gavin, yeah, I'm not bad mate, not bad.
Not bad for a 0-0 draw.
That's
mate.
That's it. Content would be the word. I think.
And also joining us today as a special guest, two-time Master Coach of the Year, host of the Paul Mort Talk Shit podcast, and all-round massive lads fan, Paul Mort. Hiya Paul, how's it going?
Mate, I'm very excited to talk about something different. I do a lot of podcasts and I never get to talk about football, so I'm very excited.
No. Well, this is what all brings us to the table, isn't it? Football, you know.
It is.
Yeah, we all live different lives, go down different paths, but it's Sunderland which brings us together. You had your ice bath yet? I just want to know that.
Mate, I haven't. On Sunday, I trained jiu-jitsu up in Washington first, and then I have an ice bath after.
Right. I need one of those. It's not the same as having a cold shower, is it? But yeah, I've noticed on your social media that you like an ice bath.
It's wild, mate. It's wild. I love it when you say, I like an ice bath. Sounds like we're kind of saying I like a nice bath. There's not much nice about it.
Paul, just for those listeners who maybe don't know too much about who you are, what you do, would you mind just filling them in very quickly if it's easy to do?
Yeah, I'll do that really quickly. I am, like you said, Gav, I'm 2 times UK Master Coach of the Year. I work with people all over the world. And when I get asked what I do, I hate saying I'm a life coach because that sounds shit. So I just help people get their shit together. It started off with men, and then it's just expanded to everyone that's ready to get their shit together. Yeah, so I'm a big Sunderland fan. I've had a season ticket since I was about 15, and I'm 42 now. I had a 2-year sabbatical when I moved to Mowbray, and I've been back in for. I've even managed to convince me kids to come now.
Nice. How's that been?
Neither of them came yesterday.
No.
Yeah, neither. No. So I had an event at Goodison Park on Friday, Everton, and I came back yesterday. I've been looking forward to the game for ages because I've missed the last couple at home. They both were complaining about going, so I didn't make them come. And I went with my dad instead.
Did they realise how lucky they are? Because
we're in Quinton Sports Bar and everything, man.
They get the pamper treatment. My mate brought his 4-year-old daughter yesterday for the first time. She actually really enjoyed it, considering nothing really happened.
Well, I actually enjoyed the game as well, you know. I enjoyed yesterday's game.
So did I. I'll come on to that. But very quickly, where can people find your stuff, your social media and things before we get into the game?
Paul Mort 1 on Instagram. You can find Paul Mort on YouTube. You can find Paul Mort on Facebook. Instagram's a bit of a nightmare at the minute because there are 4 fake accounts.
All right.
Which I suppose means I've made it.
Yeah, well, we've got a couple of parody accounts knocking about. Like, it normally means that you're doing something right, doesn't it?
That's the mags.
Well, I don't know. So yesterday's game, when you see it on the face of it, Chris, a 0-0 draw doesn't look particularly appealing. But I actually thought we played really well. It was quite an exciting game. There was a big crowd there. You know, wasn't all bad, was it? To be fair.
No, I thought it was a good game. When you said the result right up front there, the only thing I'm absolutely gutted for, because I did the preview on the website and I did the preview podcast this week. Preston had drawn 5 out of the 10, half their games this season 0-0, and I didn't put money on it. Why the hell didn't I put? I can't believe I didn't put a wedge on it. I think even Frankie or Danny Collins mentioned it in the commentary. They were like, "Oh, it's bound to be a 0-0." And I think even in our chats, people were saying it's going to be 0-0, isn't it? It wasn't a dull 0-0. I thought it was quite tactical. I thought it was quite a bit of 2 different styles coming up, you know, against each other and kind of clashing. And you just need to look at the stats and to know that kind of we had, you know, 2/3 of the possession. We had twice as many shots. Well, we had half as many shots on target, which I'm sure was something we'll come on to. But yeah, I thought actually it was a good game to watch. It was a good point because the Preston were organised and they were dangerous. But yeah, it wasn't like you were disappointed with the 0-0 or sitting there thinking, God, I was bored stiff with that. So it was a good game to watch.
What about you, Paul? Did you enjoy it as much as maybe I did in the stands?
Yeah, mate. I thought we played a lot of good football. I thought we looked really solid at the back. I didn't think apart from that one, Patterson made a great save straight down the middle. Yeah. That's the only one when I thought, they look like scoring. But the rest of the time, I thought we looked really comfortable. And I thought they sat with so many men behind the ball. I thought they played really deep.
Yeah.
So we never really got in behind that often. But yeah, I thought we played some really nice football, but we really lacked a striker yesterday. Everyone knew that, but I thought we really lacked someone with physical presence.
I think it was strange, isn't it? Because, we've had our two strikers. Everyone knows we've had our two strikers injured. But yesterday, it was really weird, wasn't it? Because I felt it was the first time since Sims got injured where I thought, I miss them now. But we haven't in the previous games. But just because, like you said, we needed that focal point, it was the first time we missed that kind of front man, wasn't it?
Do you know what I think, you guys? I think that not having a front man forces us to actually play better football. Mm. Do you know what I mean? They have to keep it shorter, so it's neater, it's tidier, it's a bit more exciting. But then you're like, I wish we just had someone to get on the end of it.
Yeah, well, there was quite a lot of that, wasn't there, in the game where we had crosses across the box and stuff, where you just thought, maybe if there was a Ross Stewart there, that would have been in the back of the net. But to be fair to the rest of the players, and my mate said this after the game, we maybe wouldn't have played, like you've just said, Paul, we maybe wouldn't have played like that with the striker on the pitch. So it's hard to predict what would have happened with a forward on there, but I think there was a couple of times where, obviously we started with Embleton quite high up on the pitch, and Embleton's not a striker, he tries his best in what he's being asked to do, but he's not a striker, and he wasn't gambling where, forwards would have gambled in the box. He was sort of hanging back, maybe like a midfielder would. He wasn't, getting on the end of some of the crosses. And that's not me having a go at him, it's just a reality of the situation, really, isn't it? That we tried our best, but ultimately we couldn't cut open what was a very solid team.
Do you know what it reminded me of? Remember when Allardyce was here and everyone used to say Allardyce played the long ball, but because Defoe was our main striker, I thought we played great football then. So it's kind of like we just needed, I don't even think we needed a big striker. I think we just needed a striker.
Yeah, somebody who knew where to be in the right positions.
Yeah.
I mean, you were spot on. I mean, there was one move that happened down the right-hand side, I think it was in the first half, because Embleton and Pritchard naturally just want to go to the ball and get involved because they want the ball. Both of them kind of gravitated towards the ball.
Yeah.
And we did this fantastic move. We kind of pinged it around Preston, cut them open. And then when we got to it, we realised that we had nobody in the box because everyone had joined the move outside the box and got involved.
Yeah.
And I think when you got that, you just thought, this is the first time that because Preston have packed the box out, we needed that Stewart, Sims, whoever it is, just to be in the 6-yard box, just to stay on the penalty spot and be that person where if you chuck a ball in or a little kind of nice ball in behind, you've got someone on the shoulder who wants to get in behind and get a shot off.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of the games in League One last season where teams used to come to the stadium and just pack the box, put 11 men there, try and get a point. I don't care what Ryan Lowe says, they didn't come to win that game. They came for a point. They knew that we were a threat from an offensive perspective, and they weren't interested in really winning the game. That's not to do down their achievements, by the way. I thought in the game, actually, Preston had some good chances. They made us work for it. Elise had a one off the line, didn't he? And Patterson, obviously...
Mate, what a clearance that was, by the way. That was fun.
Yeah, well, I've only watched it back this morning, and it was...
unbelievable.
Does he back heel it? Or is it
sort of like... so. It was with his right foot.
It's acrobatic, let's put it that way.
But...
He's been doing some of your jiu-jitsu moves or something like that, Paul, because he kind of chucked himself at it.
Well, when I went towards him, because it was on his right foot, I thought, no, this is an OG written all over it. But when he cleared it, I was like, wow.
Well, you had to see a replay of how he did it, because when it was in full speed, you thought, how's he getting to that?
Well, I was at the other end of the pitch. I sit in the southwest corner, so I just seen it come off the line. Everyone was like, is that a clearance off the line? I was like, yeah, I think it was Elise. Then I saw it back this morning, and I was like, Jesus, how's he done that? We'll come on to him actually more generally, I think, probably. But Preston's tactics, Chris, I mean, bit of a shithouse team, weren't they?
Yeah, but I thought it was brilliant. No, I thought, you talked about it being like League One opposition, and it was kind of those tactics that we were used to seeing at the Stadium of Light when teams came for that point. But the thing is, it's now a level up that they did.
That quality of player.
That they did it so much better than the teams that we came up against in League One. They were really organised. I mean, I think Ryan Lowe's got his team playing exactly, right for the players that he's got. I mean, he sets up perfectly. The players know exactly what they're doing. I mean, Preston are going to be a mid-table side. They're going to be solid. They're going to get points away from home. I mean, they're unbeaten in 5 away from home. And you can see how the churn. I mean, 6 out of 11 0-0 draws tells you everything. It's not that wasn't just kind of how Sunderland played against them. They've done that to 5 other teams already this season, and we're not even a kind of a quarter of a way through the season. It was really interesting because it was those two sort of different styles clashing. And it's a game we're going to see again, and it's the type of game we're going to see again and again this season. But I think now we know how those games are going to pan out, that we're going to dominate the ball, we're going to make chances. And I think, like, Paul's mentioned already, with that striker, you'd like to think that in most of those games, we're going to come out on top rather than just getting a point.
Yeah, I think what you said there, Chris, was really interesting when you said it was interesting. And that's what I thought as well. It was a bit like League One, but they tend to lump it, whereas I thought Preston tried to play a little bit. And it was quite, I found it quite fascinating. Like, it was more tactical than League One, I think. It was quite fascinating now.
More of a styles clash.
It was. I mean, you've just described it perfectly. I was watching how it was all playing out because, they played 2 up front and they just were so organised when we had the ball that they just thought, we're going to get a chance. And if we nick one of those chances, we're going to get 3 points. And like you mentioned earlier on, Paul, I mean, Patterson made a good save. And a couple other times, even though they might not have gotten a shot off, they got into some dangerous positions and there was a couple of scrambles in the box. And the other thing was, we might come onto it as well, because we've mentioned it in other podcasts, they were trying to play on our weaknesses on set pieces, because the amount of kind of daft free kicks we gave away, and they played for them because they knew that was one of our weaknesses. And a couple of times they looked really dangerous off crosses.
Brady whips a good ball in as well, by the way, doesn't he?
That's it.
He whipped a couple in where I was like, little shit. He whipped a couple in where I thought, that is a good delivery, that.
That was their main threat from my perspective. I think Preston just... Whenever they came forward for a corner, my heart sank, because I was looking at their team and I'm thinking, not one of them is under 6 foot. It seemed that way anyways, where I was stood. You had Brady, he's been Premier League for most of his career, you know what I mean? So his delivery's obviously decent. And then you've got some big lads there. And then you look in our box, we've got Danny Barton, we've got Alese, and then other than that, you're looking at sort of Luke O'Nien. I think at one point, I don't actually know who the Preston player was, but Pritchard was marking him, and there was a good foot and a half between them. And it was I think it was a free kick. Again, I haven't seen the full game back, so I can't remember. But I think it was a free kick from like our right hand side, and it was whipped round the back of the sort of the line, and at the back stick they had 2 lads who were both probably 6'3", 6'4", and we had Pritchard and Roberts, and I'm looking at it, and they got it across the goal, and I think it was Alese who got rid of it. And
Alese won everything, man. Honestly, the ball was like a magnet to his head.
Well, we might as well talk about him, actually, Alese.
Just quickly on the set-piece subject before we leave it behind, Tony Mowbray has obviously kind of highlighted it in training as a weakness, and he's worked on it, because actually, to be fair, Danny Collins spotted it in during the game, and he called it out, and it was a brilliant kind of observation that he made during the game, that we've now started to do this system where Luke O'Nien, Danny Bart and Alese stand kind of on the 6-yard box. So they stand on the 6-yard box line, one at the front post, one in the middle and one at the back. And they don't mark anybody. It's their job to purely, just because they're the best kind of in the air that we've got. They're the 3 players who can win the ball in the air, of the 11 that we had out anyway. That it was just purely their job to just go and win the ball. Don't worry about marking anybody. It's not like he's your man. Don't worry about any of that. Just get up, win the ball. If it drops in your area, that's your ball. And the rest of the players, all they had to be, like you said, Pritchard, because there was a 2 foot difference when he was marking someone, all he had to do was be a nuisance. Just put them off.
Yeah.
He wasn't there to win it. The 3 lads, that was their job to win it, and the other lads just give them a nudge or give them a kick or bite them or whatever they needed to do to kind of stop them getting the ball.
Yeah, you mentioned Alese there, Paul, so we'll come on to him. I think I've been a really big sort of proponent of bringing in young players like for years on this podcast. Like, I love it, and I love seeing young lads come in and do well. But when he played against Sheff Wed in the Cup, and he had a bad game on his debut, he wasn't great. A lot of people had already made their mind up about him, but then since Dennis Serkins got injured and Alise's come into the team, he's been outstanding. And you're right again, like, it's not just we can talk all day about his sort of the defensive stuff that he did well, the clearances, the just being in the right place at the right time and stuff on the line. But I actually thought as a left back, he got forward really well as well, and he joined in. There was one, we're talking earlier about them crosses that were flashing across the box. There was one that he created where he sort of just marauded down the line, put a really good ball across, and I think Embleton, he actually, in that occasion, he gambled on going to the back post and he went too early. And Alese just all round outstanding, wasn't he? It wasn't just his defensive work, it was his attacking stuff as well.
Do you know, when you talk about these young players, you know what it reminds me of? Do you know when you play like Football Manager or FIFA? You always sign these types of players. You do. It's like now it's real life FIFA because you never buy proven.
There's quite a lot of people have said that though. That it's a bit like Sunderland are playing real life Football Manager.
It is. It's class. It's class. But Alese, do you know what's interesting about him? I thought they'd brought him in as like a left-sided centre back, which I think that's why they've signed him. But I was really impressed with how good he was going forward for his height and his size, and I just thought he was he was excellent yesterday, and his energy levels were tremendous as well. Yeah, I'm really excited about seeing more, because that was actually the first time I'd seen him. I think he came on as a sub against someone, but that was the first time I'd seen him, and I was very, very impressed. I'm excited to see more of him.
We know what, Chris, that when I think about sort of, when Paul's just mentioned it there, we brought him in as a centre-half, and a little bit surprised he can play left-back. Like, I'm the same. I had no idea he could play there. But when you mentioned Danny Collins there's a player who sort of, it wasn't that long ago when left centre-halves were left-backs, you know. Football's cyclical, isn't it? And eventually we come back to the same point again. We were playing a back four yesterday, and Alese, he was playing left-back, but it's not totally untraditional, is it? That somebody who's a left centre-half can play there, and, you know, maybe it's just a case of that the modern centre-halves, a lot of them have got pace, ability on the ball. Maybe it's just a case that, you know, we're bringing in lads who can play multiple positions, and it's proved.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think that, Paul kind of touched on it there. You know, that left-sided centre-half position now, you know, you look at Chris Wilder's Sheffield United, that kind of wide centre-half, people expect them to play like full-backs. So kind of, you know, well, I used to play centre-half back in the day, and, you know, you were just expected to win the ball and lump it, and kind of said that's what centre-halves were expected to do back in the day. And now, centre-halves are expected to be almost like full-backs, where they're strong and quick and they're good on the ball and they can carry it out. But the way that Alese plays, it gives us that flexibility that even during games, because yes, we set up with a four, but then sometimes if you look how when, you know, if we have 5 minutes under the cosh, we might revert back to what looks like a five, where Alese tucks in and Roberts might drop in, or kind of Neil or Evans might drop into that full-back position. So you've got all that flexibility during the game. And what I thought was brilliant with the way Alese got forward, sometimes you expect playing a back four that your full-backs, you know, if Alese goes, then Gooch tucks in or something like that. There was times when Gooch knocked the ball in from the right and Alese was at the back post.
Yeah.
And just Alese, and then, but with his speed and kind of how fit he is, 2 minutes later, Alese was winning the ball back on the halfway line. And he was just everywhere. Everywhere the ball was, Alese just seemed to be there. It bodes well, because, I mean, we were putting in the chat during the game, when you consider that he's come in and you've got Serkin out, Ballard out, you know, two huge players who were in good form and looked cracking. And Alese's form, you know, you just wonder how these kind of really highly rated players are going to get back in.
Well, that's it, isn't it? And you at the end of the day, that's why you have a squad, really. I would much rather be in a position, Paul, where Sunderland have got like 2-3 players sitting on the bench, or even lads sitting outside the matchday squad who in most other teams would be playing. I would rather be in that position than be in a position where you stretch. Like, obviously at the minute, up front we're stretched because we don't have a striker. But what that's done is it's give other players the opportunity to prove what they can do. Chris just said it there. Alese only got in the team because Serkin got injured. Now I'm looking at it and going, where does Serkin fit in? He doesn't, probably. And he before he got injured, he was one of our best players this season. Yeah. So it's a bit like, you know, it's not. Yes, for the players, it's difficult, isn't it? Because they want to play, but you can't argue against the fact that this lad's playing so well. Why would you drop him?
It's interesting that you were just saying there about our squad. I think we seem to have a lot of like wingers and attacking midfielders. But then what I think about what Neil ended up playing and what I suppose we would have played in Mowbray's first game was 2 up front and no wingers, just wing backs. And I was thinking yesterday, where do these players go if he does go back to 5 and 2 wing backs? It's quite exciting as well, though.
No, it is. And we might as well come on to it, because I was going to talk about the subs in a bit, but you've got lads sitting on the bench there who came on yesterday, you know, like the likes of Ahmad and Barn, and you've got Diaku who came on, who, he doesn't often show a great deal when he comes on, but still he's there. You've got other lads waiting to come in. We still haven't seen Mishu, the PSG lad. So there's a lot of options there, isn't there, in terms of what we can do going forward, and it keeps it competitive. And of course, Benetti as well. Bennett, still haven't got his name right. I don't know what it is. I was calling him in the end. I was just calling him Dewey because
that's what I heard around me yesterday. But then when the guy announced him, I'm sure he said Jebison Bennett.
He did, well, I thought that as well. Yeah,
I was like, well, everyone's calling him Dewey, so what do you call him now, Jebby? What do you call him? But yeah, it was.
To be fair, Paul, he was pictured on the E2 going back to Shields after the game. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, yeah, got off at the new ground.
Yeah, so maybe next home game, just get on the E2 and you might see him. You might be able to ask
Hold
him.
on, is that an actual thing, Gav?
Yeah.
No.
He was sat on the front of the E2 with his dad going back to Shields.
He lives in Shields?
Well, the Metros were off, so maybe he was just trying to get back to Shields to get a Metro.
That is mad, because talking to Shields, I see Kevin Phillips running past my house all the time.
Aye.
I'd go out to get a selfie, but he's a bit too quick for me.
I would just be singing his song every day out the top window.
I think on the socials he got the bus there as well. He actually got the bus to the stadium as well earlier in the day.
Amazing.
We've got a lad who works on the buses. We should try and get him a pass or something like that, so he doesn't have to pay for the bus every week. And we
day saver. Get him a day saver.
You know what it'll be like. There'll be like a bunch of Sunderland fans waiting for him at the bus stop, and they'll take him there, and there'll be bodyguards for him on the way there, make sure he gets there all right and all this sort of stuff. But
there was a video of him crossing the road to the bus stop, and I think it was Second Tier, who good friends of ours, obviously Second Tier podcast. They put the video out and they said, "Does anybody know how to understand Mackem?" Because I think the lad in the car just says, "Jewison Bennett mooching about, go on for a Mackies."
Well, it was like the modern day kind of parting of the Red Sea when he crossed the road, because all the traffic stopped and they went, "Oh, hang on,
this is mad. This is
all
mad,
the traffic
man.
just let him pass." But I mean, just talking about people on the bench. I mean, just quickly. I mean, we'll come on to the lads who kind of got on, but just talking about the defenders we've got. One lad who I do feel sorry for at the minute is Bailey Wright. Because he was an absolute rock last season, and it just goes to show the players we've brought in and how well these young lads are doing. That Bailey Wright's just not getting a look in, and I'm not complaining that he's not, because people are in form, but you've got to kind of feel for him, because he kind of what he did for us last season. But when these lads are coming back, you might think Bailey Wright might end up moving on in January, but it's one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, well that you mentioned the names before. Ballard, like, we paid £2 million for him, and he looked really good when he was playing at the start of the season. And I'm thinking they haven't signed him to sit and mooch on the bench, so he's going to be in amongst it pretty quickly, I would think, once he's fit. At some point there'll be an opening, and he'll be the first one back. And then you're right, Bailey Wright. I mean, where does he even fit in to all of this? It's difficult. But like I say,
though, there's a lot of games, isn't there? In these divisions, there's so many games.
There is, and that's the other thing we were talking about. When we done our Twitter space on Friday, I think, including the Preston game, it was something like 6 games in 21 days. So we've got another 5 games coming up over the next sort of 20 or so days. It's going to be hectic, and there are going to be openings, aren't there, Paul? There's going to be chances for lads to come in and get that chance, because it would be unfathomable to think that all of these players are just going to stay fit and in form.
And Matete as well didn't get on yesterday. I seen him, I was like, oh, I'd maybe bring Matete on, and then he didn't get.
Yeah.
Didn't even get looked at, which was really interesting, because I think he's a good player as well.
Yeah, well, to be fair to Mowbray, I think the subs that he made were all offensive ones, and I was really glad when I seen the 2 lads come on around the hour mark, because I thought, well, that's him saying I'm going for it. He thought that we'd done enough at that point, and he'd seen enough to think, if we just get a couple more creative lads on the pitch, we're probably going to nab a goal here.
Yeah, I said that to me dad. I said, it was like 59 minutes or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I said to me dad, wow, this is, he wants this. He's got, I said the word brave, actually, to me dad.
Yeah, it was brave, and we have, that's something we couldn't say often, Chris, is it, about Sunderland managers making subs during games over the years?
No, well, the messages were flying around when he was making the subs, because it was a statement of intent from Tony Mowbray, because when he brought Corey Evans off, I think everyone thought out of the 2, he's going to keep Evans in to protect the back 4 and bring Dan Neil off. But he kept the ball player on and brought Corey Evans off, and everyone just thought, right, well, that was a signal that what Tony Mowbray wanted to do in the last half hour. He wanted to go out and win the game, and you saw where Barr was playing. Barr was almost kind of ahead of Dan Neil. Dan Neil was almost a holding midfield player. Bar had the ball kind of 5 yards outside the box. That's where he mainly got the ball. And he was kind of dribbling and kind of, he looks a player. And it's only a matter of time, I think, before Bar starts a game, because he just looks.
Yeah, I think he looks really different. Yeah. He looks really different to anything we've had for a while in midfield, doesn't he? Like, he looks like he could beat a player.
Yeah. He reminds me a little bit of, it probably sounds daft, and I think I've said this more than once, but like we haven't had a player like Alfred N'Diaye since he was here, and I really liked him years ago. You know, he was that big, strong, box-to-box physical presence. We don't tend to sign those types of midfielders. I'm not saying Bar's anything sort of. I don't think he's like a big physical presence, but I just think a player who will pick the ball up deep and drive from midfield. There aren't many of them about. I haven't seen many of them at Sunderland. But
no, we sign holding midfielders, don't we? We sign holding midfielders.
Small holding midfielders.
Slow as fuck. Holding midfielders.
And then you look at Bar, though, you're right, he looks a little bit different, and I think it's a matter of time, like Chris says, before he starts a match.
And you know what? There was at one point he dropped in because he wanted the ball. He picked the ball up, or he got a pass from O'Nien, I think it was, and one of the Preston strikers was pressing him, and all he did was just drop the shoulder, did a dummy, and then he had 20 yards in front of him. And that's what he is. I mean, with his age and the way he's been taught to play all the way through his life, he just looks forward. He just knows that, you know,
long strides, long strides, hasn't he?
I drop the shoulder. I've got 20 yards in front of us, and he doesn't look for a sideways pass. He's like, he wants to create something. If he's got space in front of him, he'll drive into it, and you can just tell by his touch. He's just got this touch about him where the ball's always under control. You don't think he's kind of, you know, bobbling about or anything like that. He's just got it, you know, glued to his foot. And I just think he looks a cracking prospect. I mean, Paul said the word as well earlier on. It's exciting. Like these players, when they come on, you want them to come on. And even though the player who they're replacing had a good game, you're still thinking, oh well, you know, let's see what they can do. You know, but I mean, people were on the edge of their seats when Bennett came on and when Bar came on, and it's just a good feeling to have these players on the bench.
I've never said this before, but do you know what's weird, Chris? I feel this is a really weird thing to say. It's almost like we need like a Carabao Cup game. Do you know, so you can see all of these players from the start. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you get these, see what they're really like without changing the entire, like without losing a league game. You think let's have a Carabao Cup game and give all these players a game.
Let's get back in the Pizza Cup and play some under 21.
Well, I think Mowbray said he was going to blood them in, and his way of blooding them in has just been to throw them on, which I quite like actually. Yeah. But I think Chris was right. It's, to be honest, you're right in a way. There normally in this stage of the season, you would think, well, we've got a cup game coming up. These lads would all get a chance to show what they can do. But I think like importantly, what's happening is when he's putting them on the pitch, they're actually showing something. They're not just coming on and filling a number. I mean, if I'm going to be uber critical, I would say that probably Leon Diako's coming on and not really showing a great deal. I don't like to pick on the lad.
Yeah, I don't think he'd be anywhere near the matchday squad.
Yeah,
if it wasn't for these injuries, I think he's the first one to go.
You've just called it there, Gav, that, you know, when you talked about these players getting a chance, I mean, it started yesterday. It's a period of, I think it's 1, 2, 3, like 7, is it 9 games in 5 weeks or something like that we've got? I mean, we've got a period now before the World Cup where you can't imagine, because of the just sheer amount of games we've got in the next 5 weeks, you can't imagine that Mowbray's going to go out with the first 11 for all of these games in the next 5 weeks. I mean, at the age they're at, he won't want to flog these players. Because, I mean, look what happened to Callum Doyle last season. I mean, came out the blocks because he's a young lad and he just gradually burnt out as the season goes on. Mowbray's not daft. He doesn't want to burn these players out and kind of flog them. And he doesn't have to. Because look at the form of these players on the bench. We've got the strength and depth to be able to rotate. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these lads get a full game in the next 5 weeks.
Yeah. We're quickly talking about them there. Bennett. I'm going to say Bennett, right? Because I'm second guessing myself every time I want to talk about him. It's doing me head in. Bennett, when he came on, Chris, you said it there about him, sort of people are on the edge of their seats. He picked up the ball on the left-hand side and just ran at their full-back and put a really good ball across. Again, I think if there was a Ross Stewart in the box, that's in the back of the net. Ahmad, when he came on, when I say this, this probably sounds daft. I've got this thing about comparing players from years ago, but he reminds us of Sessegnon. When the ball comes into his feet, he turns really quickly and it just sticks to him. And I'm really excited to see what he can do. And he's another one who'll probably start a game soon. But I mean, there were a number of good individual performances, weren't there, Paul? I thought Patrick Roberts was brilliant.
Patrick Roberts is my favourite player at the minute. I think he's got it. He's just got that bit of class. He's got that. His first touch is unbelievable. He's got that. He looks up. For me, I thought at Wembley he was sensational.
Yeah.
I thought at Wembley he was amazing. And I think, for me, he's been very unlucky not to get in the team until we've had injuries.
Yeah. Well,
and I think that's a formation thing.
Yeah, we talked about that at the time. I think it was Martin on these podcasts was saying, like, we've got all these wingers, but the system we play doesn't suit wingers, And Patrick Roberts, to be fair to Tony Mowbray, since he's come in, he's made a big point of making a focal point out of the team around Roberts is now the key player in the side, and I heard something from somebody who'd been chatting to him sort of, and he talked about how, he pinpointed Roberts and he just looked at him and said, how much talent you've got, you know what I mean?
That's exactly what it is.
The beauty about having someone like Roberts is he's so talented and he produces so much. But the beauty is it's not like the McGeady days where it's kind of give the ball to Roberts and we've got nobody else on the pitch. He shares the burden with kind of Clark and Pritchard and Embleton and all. So we've got a load of good players around him, so we're not reliant on him.
You can see that he's thriving on it because he's gliding past players this season in a way he wasn't doing when he first came here.
Yeah.
Like he looked, he would show it in bits and pieces, but this season it seems to be every time he picks up the ball on the right-hand side, he just takes their players to pieces. The problem with Roberts is the end product part, isn't it? And that's maybe where you could be a little bit critical with his performance yesterday. There was a couple of times where he just skinned 3-4 lads and the ball wasn't on target. There was one in particular where he kind of ran along the byline, didn't he? And then cut inside and curled it a little bit like he did against Reading. And you'd obviously went for goal, but you would expect our players to gamble on it. Nobody did. But I think that, to be honest, I think that'll come more. You can see that he's got everything there to be pretty successful.
It'll be interesting to see what would be happening if we did have two strikers. Like, it would be very interesting because I think he could also play Pritchard's position. I think he'd also play that little number 10 role. Although I wouldn't leave Pritchard out. I didn't think he was in the game yesterday.
No, and I don't think he was at Watford either when you look back at it. But again, a little bit like Embleton, we're asking them to play a slightly different role, aren't we? So
I thought O'Nien was excellent as well yesterday, actually.
Yeah, well, you could say him and Danny Bart were both excellent.
Class.
Just quickly touch on that then, Chris. O'Nien and Bart at the back. We were talking about Ballard and, Cirkin, where they fit back in. I mean, O'Nien's the one naturally you look at and think, would he come out? But he's doing everything he can, isn't he, to try and keep his place in the side at the minute. I mean, that was a really good performance from him yesterday. It was probably as well as he's played all season.
It was. I mean, kind of we've touched on it, that the three that the two that we've got plus Alese are all kind of there because of injuries almost, and they've been given a chance. But I mean, I'll bang the drum again on it, Gav, because I've mentioned it a few times. I mentioned it in pre-season with that kind of best League One 11 that I think Luke O'Nien is so suited to playing at the back in kind of as a modern day centre half. He doesn't look like he's alongside Danny Bart, and he doesn't look like Danny Bart. Danny Bart looks like a kind of a standard centre half. He's a big bruiser. When he's on the ball, he doesn't look all that comfortable. Luke O'Nien doesn't look like a natural centre half, but I think he now, because of the period he had under Lee Johnson, where he was forced to play there, and I thought he's brilliant in that period. And now I think he actually looks like a natural centre half. And the way it's almost like Danny Bart sometimes when they play out from the back, it's I'll give it to Luke and Luke can play that forward pass, because Danny Bart, he probably could, but he just knows, well, Luke O'Nien's a bit better than that. I'll give it to him. He can start the move and he can start the tempo and knock it out wide to Lyndon Gooch, or miss Danny Bart out and go to the left and knock it to Alese or whatever, or give it in the middle.
And he played a couple of great balls in behind for Clark as well. He played a couple of great balls for Clark.
He did, and
that was our early chance, wasn't it?
The only slight thing about Danny Bart is, and I think he's playing well. I think he's in some good form, but there's just a couple of occasions where he got turned and he got done for pace, and that's the only thing I worry about with Danny Bart, is that if you get a striker with some pace, he tends to struggle. And that's why I just think I can see when, Danny Ballard, let's say, second half of the season when he gets fit, I can see Danny Ballard making that position in the centre, I can see that change being made. But they're both playing well. I mean, clean sheet, you can't knock it. And like I said, I think the way that we play suits O'Nien to play that fizzing ball into the middle to someone's feet, and I just think now he's kind of vital to the way we play.
Yeah, the only thing, if I'm going to nitpick, and I don't really like doing this, but if I'm going to nitpick at the performance, I don't know whether I felt this more being in the ground, so it's interesting to get both your perspectives on this, but I'll come to you, Paul. Sort of the way we were passing it around at times at the back, and we were a little bit dicey. Like, I don't like seeing me goalkeeper do Cruyff turns in his own box. I just don't like it.
My dad loses his mind every time he does that. It's class. I love it when people lose their mind next to me. My dad was losing. Why doesn't he just lump it? I'm like, Dad, it's 2022, man.
But it's tough, isn't it? Like, because you can see the players are playing with so much freedom, Paul. And that's a symptom of it, you know. They're playing with freedom and they're really confident. So they're confident in their ability to get away with it. And they did get away with it.
I thought Gooch dropped a couple of yesterday. I thought he looked a bit off the pace yesterday. I think the good thing is now, though, he doesn't seem to get as much shit as he used to. Like, I was thinking 6 months ago, if he was giving the ball away as often as he did, and he played a couple of passes where when Roberts got booked, there was someone else that should have got booked, and I was like, it should be Gooch that's getting booked for that pass. He played a couple of passes where I was like, he's going to get booked here, and it should be Gooch that's getting it. But I thought he looked a bit off the pace yesterday, but I think now he can defend so much better that people don't give him as much stick as he used to. So yeah, he was the probably our poorest player yesterday. But
if looks could kill, Paul, the look that Roberts gave Gooch, he turned around and was like, "What were you doing?" He was because
killed me there.
He sold him like 5 yards short, and Roberts. To be fair, it was. I mean, you were talking about it last time with Corey Evans at Watford, Gav, about when he tripped the player up when they were kind of on the counter.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, if Roberts hadn't tripped him, because we'd committed so many players forward, but then he turned around and Gooch, he was like, what you doing?
Aye. Well, I guess that's just a symptom of being in the Championship as well, you know. If these lads were all perfect at everything they did, they wouldn't be playing in this level.
No. And actually, just about the level, I mean, actually, Paul, just on that Lyndon Gooch subject, you know, about, you know, a lot of that stick, you know, that some of the players got was just purely because of where the club was at. You know, like League One. Yeah. The fans were so pissed off generally about, you know, we shouldn't be in League One. And then whenever someone made a mistake, it was like, oh, you know, bloody, you know, son, we're in League One. Everything came out on players. But now we're in...
And I suppose there's got to be someone that they take it out on. And unfortunately for Gooch, it was him, right?
But now, like you said, they've got that space to make a few mistakes, which means, you know, Gav was saying about Patterson doing turns in the 6-yard box and all this sort of stuff. But they've got a bit of freedom now because they know the fans aren't going to be like, absolutely... I mean, if that happened League One, people have been kind of booing and saying what you're doing and on his back. But
do you think that little bit of extra space is why Dan Neil's looked better? I think he's looked better at this level.
Yeah.
I don't think he's been amazing. I just think he's looked a little bit more at home in the Championship than he did in League One.
I actually think, well, if you looked at all the pictures of pre-season, I think he worked so much on bulking up a bit and getting like that body strength up top that now in the Championship he's got a bit more to kind of keep the ball and turn with the ball, whereas last season he was getting shoved off. So I just think he knows what he needs to work on.
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a lot actually, in that especially last season when we were actually watching Sunderland struggle to break down teams just like Preston in League One. We were saying quite often, you know, there's players in this team who will look better in the league above, and he was always one of the players we mentioned. You know,
maybe Roberts is that as well.
Yeah.
The one thing, just to going back to Lyndon Gooch, the 1 point I wanted to make about Lyndon Gooch is 10 minutes to go in the box, he stuck a leg out, and you know, I think hearts were in the mouths when everyone thought he might give a penalty. And on the replay, because I thought, no, he's dived. And you watch Lyndon Gooch and he starts shouting at their players on the floor. But I tell you what, you saw the replay and he stuck out a leg to trip the lad. And he kind of half pulled back. But I tell you what, I don't think we would have had that many complaints if he'd given a penalty.
Right, yeah. I mean, these are the things you're sort of missing. I said dive all day. To be fair,
he stuck out a leg.
Before we round off on the game, let's quickly talk about the ref, actually, because I thought he was terrible. Like, I just thought he managed the game so badly, Paul. I don't know what you thought when you were watching it.
I thought in the first half, I thought they gave away so many fouls. I wonder what were the numbers on how many fouls they gave away.
Well, I can only see the overall ones, but apparently they made 14 and we made 11. But I just thought the referee's management of the game was shocking. Like, I thought in the first half, it was a case of, I don't know. We said this the other week when we played Borough, didn't we, Chris? Like, the ref seemed to have in his head, I'm not going to give a yellow card in the first half an hour.
My dad said that. My dad used to be a referee, and he said, this ref's not going to book anyone.
No, and that's how it felt yesterday. It felt as though he just wasn't going to book anyone unless it was like a 2-footed lunge at the knee, because we were getting kicked a bit, and it was the tactics I expected from Preston. I expected them to try and slow us down, break up the play, give fouls away, all that. We've seen it millions of times, but because the referee was letting it go, they were doing it more, and and then you're like looking at the ref and you're saying, where's the protection for our players here? You should. I mean, I could have counted 4 or 5 occasions before Roberts got that yellow, actually, where they should have had yellow cards, and I'm thinking there's no consistency with these referees. They just do what they want.
There was one in the middle of the pitch. Did he get booked for that? Remember the one when we were breaking? And I'm sure I didn't. There was two players fouled. I think it was Roberts. It was someone in the middle of the pitch breaking forward. It might have been Ebelton, actually. And they took him out on the halfway line. I was like, if that's a foul. In fact, I didn't think it was a foul. It was a great sliding tackle. I don't know if you remember it. And I was like, well, if that's a foul, it's got to be a booking.
Yeah. I think they only had one yellow card. That was Liam Lindsay.
Yeah.
That was just after half time, I think.
Yeah.
I mentioned it after the Watford game that it's something we're going to have to get used to, because it's the new directives. It's the new directives that basically you've got to commit GBH before it's a free kick and a yellow card. But the referees this season, Premier League all the way through, they've been told, and it's funny because commentators have, you'd listen to them on Sky or whatever during the games, and they've actually been briefed by the referees, because they need to know that's how the game's going to flow now. And the referees don't want to blow their whistle. They don't want to give cards because they've been told not to. But it's something, and I said it's typical that suddenly we get this brilliant football and technical side, and now you've got to kind of break someone's leg to get a free kick. But
I bet Lee Cattermole wishes he was playing again.
But the problem is with that, the referees sometimes kind of almost have a bit of a brain fart and go back to kind of how they used to do things, and then you have to remember that they have to let these things go. So suddenly you get these inconsistencies where, like, you get these tough tackles with no free kick, and then suddenly there's a little niggly one and he gives a free kick, and you think, hang on, well, that was that. If that's a free kick, then all of those are a free kick. So, but our problem is, and I actually made a note about Dan Neil, the amount of little free kicks that Dan Neil gave away, and he's been guilty of it this season, and it's something he needs to be kind of aware of because of our weakness off set pieces. And I mean, to be fair, I think he was unfortunate that the referee gave them, because he wasn't given them for other things that should have been free kicks. But Dan Neil there was one just down in the corner of the kind of the north stand, the west stand, where in that corner where he gave a really daft free kick away right in the corner, which gave them a free opportunity to knock the ball in. And it's just something Dan Neil has to be aware of, because I think he's done it in quite a few games now, where he just needs to kind of harry the player rather than giving a free kick away.
So overall then, Paul, happy with the point or not? I think Tony Mowbray sounded a little bit disappointed we didn't win, but he sort of conceded that, it's probably a good point given the way Preston play and how many games have drawn 0-0 this season.
It was one of those games, and I can't remember the last time I said this about Sunderland, where I'm kind of disappointed with a point, but I'm happy with the performance. You'd never say that about a 0-0 at the Stadium of Light. It was the feeling that I've got about the game is the one that I haven't felt for, I can't remember how long, where I was happy with the performance, but disappointed that we didn't get a goal.
Yeah. Chris?
Well, it's interesting, Paul. Actually, it's that kind of League One kind of hangover a little bit, because, when we're in League One, the amount of times we drew 1-1 and came out the ground absolutely gutted. But we draw 0-0 yesterday, and everyone's like, yeah, all right, that's good, that's canny, that's not bad. But like you said, Gav, at the beginning, it's going to be a game that we're going to see almost carbon copies of again and again and again this season. But you'd like to think Stewart, Sims, or whatever We're going to have someone on the end of it. And it's funny, you mentioned Mowbray's comments after the game, and he said basically the same thing. He went, "There's nothing to worry about. We're going to have these days where we're going to play well. It's just not going to find the back of the net, but we get a point and we move on." And he said, we've got strikers to come in. Don't worry about it. We're going to see this game again. And you'd like to think with the players coming in, we're going to get 3 points more than not further in the season.
Yeah.
Do you know what I think's really mad, you guys, either? I can't remember their keeper making loads of saves either.
No, he didn't.
But we still enjoyed the game.
Yeah, it was one. Well, I think that's reflected in the stats that we saw. 2 shots on target, 16, altogether. So
and actually, now that you mention it, Paul, the ones, because we didn't have that striker, the saves that he made were all kind of wingers coming in and shooting on an angle.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Roberts had that one where he cut in, didn't he? And he tried to score at the near post. And the keeper made, I think, the 2 shots on target were those 2 saves that he made with his legs, kind of at the near post. But yeah, if you have that central player, then maybe it would have been a different kind of result.
There was one from Embleton as well where he sort of fluffed his first shot and it came back.
Oh shit! Aye,
and it was actually a really good save actually when I've watched it back.
I thought you should have done better there.
Well, yeah. But I mean, overall, I'm pretty pleased with a point. I think it's not a case of we've come away from the game and we feel like we've been robbed or anything. I think actually. Despite the fact Preston played the more negative style of the 2 teams, they had their own chances. We had to work. We had to clear shots off the line. We could have quite easily lost that game, on a different day. So
well, put it this way. I mean, just talking about Ryan Lowe and his comments after the game. I mean, everyone could see the way they set up and what they wanted out of the game. But I mean, he summed it up because they did have their chances, and he said it was nearly the perfect away performance, but they just didn't get 3 points. So he, as far as he's concerned, that was exactly the game plan, and they had chances. And if one of them had gone in, they would have just kind of shut up shop and collected all 3 points.
Which I find a little bit strange with Ryan Lowe, because his Plymouth team played nothing like this.
He hasn't got the
they were a totally different side.
Yeah,
but maybe that's the case. Yeah, but that does lead us on to the Blackpool game. So we'll quickly touch on this before we wrap up. Blackpool on Tuesday night. We play again at home. I think if we play like that, Paul, will beat them. I look at Blackpool.
Me too.
They've lost the last 3 games. They're not as solid as Preston. We've got to win that game, I think, haven't we? And I think Mowbray said that after the match as well. He was looking at it and thinking maybe 4 points from 2 games wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, I agree. Do you know what's mad? Normally, I'm not a fan of midweek games. In League One, I'd be like, ooh, shall I go to this? Shall I not go to this? But on Tuesday, I'm very excited. I think you might freshen it up a little bit. I think you might leave Evans out and put somebody else in. I think you will freshen it up a bit. I think you might leave Embleton out and maybe try one of those new lads up there. So yeah, I think we'll get 3 points on
the only reason I don't think he would take Evans out of the team is just because with him, he's sort of like that.
With that protection.
He's there, and but I can see him making a number of changes. I think Chris, I don't know what you think, but I think it might be time for Ahmad to start. It might be time for Bar to start. This might be the perfect game, a home game against somebody you should be beaten, where you're going to be expected to have the majority of the ball. Maybe it's time to do it. Pull the trigger, or do you think you'll be a little bit more cautious?
I think there'll be somewhere in between. I don't think he's going to chuck. I don't think he's going to make kind of 3 or 4 changes. I think he might. I think the change that I think I would make would be to bring Ahmad in for Embleton. I think that might be the only change he might make. I don't think he'll rotate it kind of too much, because actually we played really well. But I think the justification for making one change is that we didn't have that cutting edge, and bringing Embleton out, who likes to drop, for Ahmad, who likes to go, kind of big on the shoulder and get him behind. I think that's the change to make. But we need to be slightly careful, because Blackpool at home, that we think, they've recently come up, and we're at home and we should be winning. We've just got to be careful about the expectation, because Blackpool are a bit like Preston, where their away form is much better than their home form. I mean, they've only won 1 in 5 at home this season, but away from home, they've won 2 and drawn 1 out of the 6. So I mean, they've getting most of their points away from home so far this season. So we just need to be careful about that kind of expectation turning up, getting 3 points, and kind of giving the lads kind of a bit of leeway that actually it's going to be a tough game. Blackpool are going to come set up probably similar to Preston, and we've got to be prepared for a little bit of frustration maybe before we if we do open the scoring.
Bang on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the stats. They lost to Norwich on Saturday, which, you know, it was only 1-0. So, you know, and Norwich are a good team. They're going to be right up there. But they had almost as many shots. They had almost as many shots on target. They had an even share of the possession. So Blackpool took the game to Norwich. So it might be a case where they're a little bit more open against us, because Norwich are a bit like us. They like to play with the ball on the floor. I don't really know what to expect, but to be fair, I don't know what to expect ahead of a lot of games this season. I don't know much about the Championship still. But I'll just look at it on the face of it and think if they've lost the last 3 games, there's a weakness there that we can exploit. I agree with you, Chris. I think Ahmad comes in for Embleton just to maybe give us something different up there. And that's probably the only thing from the last 2 games where I go, if I put my finger out and say we need to change that, it's probably the fact that we're playing 4-4-2 and Pritchard is the one dropping in and sort of trying to link up the play. But ahead of him, is Embleton dynamic enough to break the lines? I don't think he is. I think we've got lads there now who are, and Ahmad naturally is probably that player who comes in, but I'll probably bring in him. I think other than that, it's going to be difficult to change anything, to be honest.
Yeah, Ahmad's also got a great song, mate, so you get a bonus point if you've got a great song. Do you know what I mean?
but we've got obviously Bennett's obviously going to be an impact player for a little while. I think Barr he could start. I don't know whether, you know, Mowbray seems pretty set on Dan Neil, doesn't he, Chris? He does. I don't know if he's going to be so quick to drop him, because I actually thought he did all right this weekend. So I don't think he's going to drop him. But this might be the game where if it doesn't go so well, we see changes afterwards to follow. You know, so Ahmad may be the only change I would make. I don't know what you would do.
Yeah, I think that would be the only change I would make. But I mean, just on Dan Neil, I mean, again, Dan Neil's now played a lot of football, you know, successive games, and you know, last season I don't think he played that many kind of successive games. He was in and out. So at some point he's gonna kind of burn out a little bit, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that change. Bar coming in for Neil. Like you said, Evans is the one that protects that back four, because everybody else we've got on the pitch, bar kind of O'Nien, Bart and Alese, and maybe Gooch, but even Gooch wants to attack. So we've got so many players on the pitch who wants to attack. Evans is really important because he's the one who sits and says, right, well, I'm not bothered about joining the attack. I'll kind of sit in. So he's... Do
you think Matete could do that?
Yeah, I think he could, but I think Matete and Matete's still learning the game. He's, you know, it's easy to forget Matete's kind of 2021, but Matete likes... He's a bit like we were talking earlier on. Matete likes driving forward into space, and sometimes if he gives away possession, Evans is the one to kind of mop up behind him. So, but saying that, Paul, at home to Blackpool, I mean, would you actually say, well, you know, shall we actually go really positive and take Evans out and go with 2 positive kind of central midfielders, or is that too much of a risk?
The season I said to freshen up, I just thought that he seems to have been struggling a bit for fitness this year. Like, he seems to just have picked up a couple of niggles, hasn't he? So I was thinking maybe they'll give him a rest on Tuesday to get him for next Saturday. I don't know.
Alex Neil used to bring Evans out every other game, didn't he? And Mowbray hasn't. Mowbray's kind of stuck him in there every game, but Alex Neil liked pulling him out every couple of games.
Didn't Evans play for Mowbray for years though? Didn't he? Did he?
Yeah. So maybe he knows. It's one of them, innit? I think. But the other side of that, Paul, is that I spoke to a Blackburn fan when we signed him, and he was really disappointed in Evans, mainly to do with his fitness, and it was Mowbray who was his manager. So it's going to be that's quite an interesting point actually. But so I'm not overly sort of scared of Blackpool at all. I think we've got nothing to fear with Blackpool, but I think we'll win. If I go around, I'll go around the table quickly just to see what you think will actually happen in the game. I think we'll win. I think it'll be quite comfortable as well. I'm going to say probably 2-0 to Sunderland. I don't know. I feel like this is one of the games we should win. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I think we'll win, but I just don't think it's going to be another Rotherham. I don't think it's going to be as comfortable as that. I think Blackpool are a better side than Rotherham, and I think it might be a little bit of kind of, you know, cat and mouse to open the door at first. But I think once we grab that first goal, I think that should be it.
Yeah.
I think we'll win 1-0, and I think Patrick Roberts will score. And do you know what I feel like about Tuesday? I'm curious. I'm very curious and interested to see what the game, because I don't know much about Blackpool either. So I'm very curious to see what happens.
But you know what it is, Paul? Just that, just watching you there answer that question, kind of having that smile on your face, that isn't it weird to be excited to kind of at the next game for Sunderland?
Very weird. Very weird, yeah. Yeah, well, like not thinking, oh my God, or oh my God. It's not even like, because I think in League One for so long, you're like, I don't really want to watch any of these players.
Yeah. Well, I've wrote about it on the site after the game. I'm walking into the stadium now, and it's not just on the pitch where I'm seeing it, where there's just no pressure on Sunderland. We're going to games, people are just totally relaxed in the pub beforehand, walking into the ground, people are they're not rushing to get to their seat, they're just sort of ambling into the ground, and then when they get in there, there's a really nice relaxed atmosphere where people are singing and it's buoyant, and it's all feeding into it's because we've come up with no expectation other than don't struggle, and I think it's evident at this point we're not going to struggle, so people are just like, well, let's just see what happens today and hope for the best. That could change on the back of a couple of bad results, and I've been quite adamant that I think people need to just remember that this is a young team trying to play the right way, we're trying to do things right, and that at some point we are going to lose games. And it's at them moments when you have to think back to like these conversations and these moments and think, we're all right. This isn't gonna go tits up as quickly as it used to, with Sunderland. We're on the right page here, and that's all I'm hoping. Like if Tuesday night doesn't go well, people don't boo, people don't get on their case. Yeah,
that's a real interesting point. About how, because I always think, how long will we be able to be like, oh well, we should keep our expectations low. I'm curious about that as well. What happens if we lose? What happens if we lose 2 in a row? How will people react?
Yeah, but I think it's already happening, because we're all. I mean, just the general kind of tone of this podcast. I mean, we've drawn 0-0. We've come off the back of a goalless draw, and you kind of listen to us. We're kind of excited about what's next after a 0-0 draw, and we're like, what's going to happen next? Who we're going to play? All these young players going to get another chance, and we're all talking like that. And when you consider that that was our 11th game, I think it was, of the season, and we haven't put back-to-back wins together this season, but we're still, we're positive because we can see what's happening. We can see the style of football played.
11, mate, it's mad. We're 11 games in. I still feel like we're watching the first couple because it's that exciting, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it tells you a lot that the club didn't really push the game. It wasn't like, let's get the stadium packed. It wasn't like kind of in the Methven days where it was all over the socials and all this sort of stuff. But we got over 41,000 without even trying, because there's that buzz about it. There's that feeling about it. People want to go and watch what's happening on the pitch. It's just
except my kids.
Well, that brings us to a nice end. But cheers for joining us, Chris. Appreciate it, mate. Bother. As always, you'll be back with a preview before. Who are we playing on Saturday?
Swansea.
They're coming thick and fast. Swansea. So you'll hopefully be back with a preview for Swansea. Cheers, Paul. Thanks for coming on, mate. Really appreciate
it. Thank you so much for having me. I've had a great time.
No problem. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you.
And thanks to the listeners. Thanks for joining us. You can catch everything leading up to Tuesday's game over on ROKERRAPPORT.com. Make sure you check that out. We'll have all the pre-match and post-match coverage. But thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.